welcome to Love Is. We're very honored and happy to have Matt and Cami to be on this interview. So we always figured that interviewing about relationships is something we don't talk about enough in the young adult community. And so we believe that it is always good just to hear from different people's perspectives about what they went through, the challenges that they went through, and just getting different tidbits of knowledge from it. I think it's always, everyone can get something out of it for sure. So we have anonymous questions that you can submit through here. If you just text the number, text to this number, 314-310-1416, it'll come through anonymously. So we definitely encourage questions as you're listening. If something that like really got you that you want to ask about, please do. We definitely would like questions to be asked. So if everyone could give a round of applause for Matt and Cami.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have, before we start, we actually have a little introduction video. Welcome to Love Is. We're thrilled to welcome Pastor Matt and his wife Cami, who have been married for 17 wonderful years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Their journey together began at a young age and have built a life centered on faith, family, and love. When they're not too busy, they enjoy traveling and cherishing every precious family moment with their 3 amazing children.
So cute.
Pastor Matt is a pastor at Life Church and is heavily involved in the worship ministry, while Cami dedicates her time to homeschooling and investing into her children's lives. Their story is one of love, devotion, and partnership. But rather than us telling it, we're excited to hear directly from them.
That's so cute. You did a great job.
Well
Thank
done.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was so fun.
As the dentist touch.
So, my first question, we
Yeah.
would like to hear your love story. So,
You want to start?
who is first?
You go first. And I can just tell you what you've gotten wrong.
There you go.
I'm just kidding.
That's what'll happen. Let's see. So the way Cami remembers it, and I think she's accurate. I was dating another girl at the time, and we met at a friend's birthday party after we had been chatting on AOL Instant Messenger. And she says the first time she met me that she was like, he's the one. And then it took me a while to catch up with that idea because I was still dating that other girl. But once we started dating, is my microphone feeding back?
Feels like it's hot.
Okay. But we started dating at 16, and lots of ups and downs, mostly on my part. You know, I was still kind of girl crazy and went through phases, and Cami was the steady one. And she was basically the one that was like, no, he's the one. I'm going to, stay with him, basically, even though I made lots of mistakes along the way. And then we dated for 5 years and got married at 21. And that was pretty much it. High school sweethearts.
Yeah. And to elaborate, when he says that I knew he was the one, I was definitely boy crazy as a teenager. Every teenage girl is. But I just had been praying, and interestingly, God protected me a lot in that area because I, of course, liked a lot of boys, but they were never interested in me or whatever. And there was just this complete block for me when it came to boys, which probably, like I said, good thing. Anyway, when I met him, he shook my hand, very nice, firm handshake. And I don't know, I felt really different about it. And I was like, oh, that was interesting. And so I went home, and I had been praying a lot about it. I had a really great, really good relationship with the Lord, probably from the age of about 15 and a half on. And so I'd been really submitting that to God. And anyway, I went home and told my mom. She was like, did you meet anybody new tonight? And I was like, yeah, I met this guy, Matt. And I was like, and it was weird, Mom, when we shook hands. I don't know. I just felt like God dropped something in my heart that this is going to be my spouse. And I was like, but that's weird, right? And she's like, I don't know. And so anyway, that never really went away. And
So did you shake hands just in passing?
so we met for the first time at a mutual friend's birthday party. So I was homeschooled, he went to school, but we had similar friends at youth group or at a certain youth group. And so anyway, it was their birthday party. And like they were like, Matt, Cammie, you guys have never met before, right? But we had talked to each other on AOL.
What was the movie?
Instant
Shanghai?
It was Shanghai Nights.
Nights?
Yeah, I don't know
Classic
if any of
Jackie
you
Chan
remember
flick.
that.
Then we went
Jackie
to a Pizza
Chan.
Hut with a buffet afterwards.
Yeah, those were the days. And Matt was wearing a SpongeBob shirt.
Yeah. And I didn't have
and
enough money for
slippers, and
Birkenstocks at the time.
slippers.
So yeah, I just had house shoes on. So.
It was excellent.
Jude is me. No.
Yeah. No, right. And Jude, I don't even know if Jude knows that, but like he just,
I had long wavy locks, just like him too.
yeah.
So you would say it was for at least for you, it was a love at first sight almost.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like I wouldn't have been like, oh my gosh, I'm so attracted to this guy. But yeah, there's something just in my heart, right? That like that tinge of like, okay, God, what are you doing here?
So it was more like God's voice than
Yeah.
even like just a infatuation at the time, right?
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah.
you felt like God
For
spoke
sure,
to you
for sure. And
at
not to
that
make
moment.
myself sound really wise or anything, it definitely turned into a infatuation at some point, for sure.
Well, of course. I mean,
Because-
come.
Teenage girl hormones.
She was pretty cool the night we met. I mean, she had a long trench coat on, fur trench coat. Yeah, I mean, it was like long. She's wearing a
my handle
Ramones
is
shirt.
GC Punk Pop Star, so I looked like a goth a little bit.
Yeah. Bracelets all the way up to your elbows.
I sure did. Stud bracelets, stud belt, dark hair, lots of eyeliner, and a Ramones shirt, of course.
So Matt, when did you feel like it was time to pop the question and because you said you dated for 5 years. Obviously, it
Yeah.
makes sense because you
For
met when you were
babies.
you were little babies. But at what point did you feel that it's time to propose?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of knew we wanted to get married and we were too young to do that. And so we were kind of waiting for her to be kind of done with her associate's degree at Jeffco at the time. She was in college. And but the proposal, like I was going to wait, and but I kind of messed it all up. And
No.
but we joke about the proposal because I had a plan and I wanted to do this whole thing and I bought the ring. And then we got in a fight one night and she was like telling me like I didn't love her, like things like that, like feeling unappreciated, unwanted by me. And I was like, this is me internally. I was like, I have a ring in my car and I'm planning on asking you to marry me. And you're telling me I don't care about you? And I got a real,
Sassy.
defensive. I think I proposed out of defensiveness. I was just like, no, you don't understand. And so
I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
So I
Right.
drove to her house that night and proposed in her bedroom, while she's doing homework, But
Yeah.
it was our story.
And it was 3 days before Valentine's Day. So I thought we have always loved movies. And so I was like really anticipating, I don't even know what movie I was wanting. I was like, I bet it's that DVD I've been wanting. I just remember thinking that. And then when I opened my eyes, I was like, oh my gosh, what? Because I was in my pajamas. Like, it's not at all what I thought a glamorous, like it's all worked up in a girl's mind, the proposal and how it will take place. But now when I think back, it's like so much us because we both are just like being cozy and like being lounging at home and stuff. And so even though I didn't see it then, I was like, actually, it's the perfect proposal for us. So
Yeah, it's very unique.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I think this question kind of goes, so we got a question, what helps you to stay disciplined or encouraged to keep God at the center of your relationship? And I think that goes through, when you first got married versus 5 years into marriage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that goes through many evolutions, I guess you could say, with getting married, having kids, those types of things. I think that personally, I can tend to be a little bit codependent. And so I've had to go through different phases of my life realizing that he's not my source, that God's my source. Where like kind of like that thing you talked about on the way to the proposal of like, are you sure that you love me? Like, are you sure you want to be with me? Like, I have those doubts and those things in life for many things, not just that. And so realizing that he is doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, loving me in the way God has asked him to. And then what's my job in that? And my job is to find that my identity and that in the Lord. And so if I start feeling that feeling like I'm not getting enough from him, or my life is, with the kids, I feel like life is chaos, all these things. I'm like, how much time with the Lord have I spent this week? And I start to kind of, know that when I kind of go off balance in those ways, that's when I need to. And so through the seasons of our marriage, when that has changed, just, finding the time that works for me. He's a morning person. I am not. And I know everybody's like, seek the Lord first thing in the morning, I'm like, the Lord is getting half of me in the morning if I'm doing that.
It's morning somewhere on this earth.
Right,
So
it's true. It's true. So I have found like afternoons or evenings are best for me. I want to be cozy. So I'll get a cup of hot tea, a cup of, coffee, and just really making sure that I get that time with the Lord no matter what. And of course, when we had babies and stuff, that seemed like non-existent. Sometimes that was like listening to a worship song when I finally got a shower. I was like, oh, thank you, Lord, for your presence in the shower. Those types of moments. But yeah, for me, it's just like adjusting to whatever phase of life we're in, finding that new normal and like being like, okay, Lord, I want to spend time with you. How do we do this? So I think that's what helped me. Is that what you asked?
yeah,
Okay.
from my
I realized I
like
was
how
talking,
I
like,
understood it is that when you felt like your thoughts started to go more out of alignment, where you started maybe more in chaos, that at that moment you feel like that's like the trigger point where it's like I feel like I'm not spending enough time with God,
Yeah.
or that you start putting too much of your source taking from Matt instead
Right.
from God.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I talk about this book all the time, so this may be the first time you've heard me talk about it, but you'll hear about it again. But there's a book by Bill Johnson that changed my life called The Way of Life. And in the book, he talks about how, you're kind of raised to believe that there's a priority list and that God's at the top of the list. And then right under God is family, and right under that's your job. And right under that is, things you do for fun. It's like you're always supposed to be prioritizing what's important. But he says that the danger with that is that you kind of separate those things and you don't look at God as being involved in a lot of those other things, And so it's important for me when you say, how do you keep God at the center of your relationship? It's actually to have a holistic view that God is actually in all the things. And that I can't say like, oh, life at church is going really good, and that's my relationship with God. No, it's like how I spoke to my children is my relationship with God, and how I spoke to my wife and how I cared for her, and my thought life is my relationship with God. And like every part of my life is my relationship with God. So I think if I'm always viewing it that way, he's kind of always at the center, and he's always
You should have gone first.
he's always refining, my life in all of those areas. And so I think that's I think how I'd look at it. And I really don't know how people have marriages or relationships, period, even outside of marriage, without God.
Yes.
It has to be painful, I'm just being honest. If you don't have something that's kind of holding you to a standard of love, I don't know what that looks like.
Right. It's
That
like
has to be
walking
painful.
through like a fog,
Yeah.
at least with God, you have a direction to go into. Yeah, for sure. So this, again, kind of going back to how you two met, because Cammie, you said that it was more, you felt like God said that this is the right person and that's it. And so the question that I think a lot of people do have is, do you think God has prepared a special person for us, or is it a choice that we make for ourselves? That like, if you pick someone, then God can make it work, or is it God has prepared someone? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to let you go first.
So you can show me up.
No, because you and I talked about this, and I think you have a more eloquent answer.
Yeah, because I
yeah?
guess from your point of view, when you met, did you have that same feeling from God?
I did not have the instant feeling, but I also think that I'm not nearly as discerning as Cami is. And so I think that's one difference there. But I do think we have a slightly different answer on it, which is okay. You know, it's okay to have, because
Yeah, absolutely.
in the end, I think that I feel like that's a lot of pressure to say that God picked one person. I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on us to think that I have to find that one person. And if I don't, I'm going to mess it all up. I think that I don't think God operates like that in any other area. You know, like if we look at the Bible, we actually see that people are sinful and they regularly like kind of mess up God's plans, or not mess them up because you can't mess them up. And so in the end, it's like they're always like getting off course, but then he gets them back on track. And so I think that our relationship with God is us going through a wilderness and we take like another trail, and we sometimes think that God's just on the trail and I got to get back to God, but it's like he's actually like with us as we got off track. You know, he's like following us. You know, the Bible talks about his relentless pursuit of us, you know, and so like if we're the lost sheep, he's not just like, I hope he comes back at some point. No, he's like actually relentlessly pursuing us. And so to say that I just have to be on this perfect trajectory that God put me on so that I can meet the person and I can get the actual job that he picked for me and all this stuff, I think is tons of pressure. Whereas I actually think he's got a machete and he's going through the jungle with us and he's helping us to get through the jungle. And so in that, I think you could find many different people that you think would be compatible with you. Now, I think compatibility is a different question. I do think some people are more compatible with each other. But I think in the end, actually the basis of any relationship is, are you loving one another like Christ? You know, the Bible says to love your wife as Christ loved the church. So I think two people can always be compatible if they're doing that. If two people are loving each other like Christ loves the church, which is it says to lay your life down for them, to basically put their needs above your own. If two people are doing that reciprocally, I don't think you can go wrong. Like I think any two people could be compatible if that's what they're doing. But that's not what most people are doing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm curious to hear from Cami as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with what he says, but I also think that like in the end, like God has a design and a purpose for each one of our lives. And so even if we go off track those things, I do just think that ultimately, whether, you know, do I think that at the end of the road, like everyone has a perfect spouse for waiting for them? Like, I feel like saying that discounts the season of singleness too that people can be in, because I think that that is really beautiful too. And God does really beautiful things in that. And so like putting that pressure on people to say they have a spouse waiting for them somewhere, that God's perfect plan is for you to be married, you know, is a lot of pressure. And so I do think that God's ultimate goal, though, is, you know, I think, and we look at Paul in the Bible, right, who remains single. I do think that if someone desires to be married, and I think that God has that person for them. And he, whether that's, you know, when you're 16, which I know our story is not the norm, or when you're, you know, I don't know, 50, right? Like wherever that is, I do think that if you have a desire for marriage, that God didn't just put that in you for nothing. And I think that, and I think that he wants to fulfill that in you.
Yeah.
Sometimes his plans are just different than ours and harder to understand, but I do think that he has, I think he has that person for you if that's what you long for. And that, like Matt said, if they're seeking the Lord and you're seeking the Lord, like eventually that's going to happen. It's just hard to know when, you know, if you are waiting for that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's like interesting. Kind of like comes to the same conclusion, but in a different way. Where how you're saying like can be anyone as long because God can kind of veer you back. But Cami, it sounds like you're like even if you veer away, God's going to still veer you back to the right person that you need to be with. Or
I mean that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I feel like if marriage is a desire for your heart and God has put that in there, I think He's going to bring you to the person that he has for you. Because I do think he is just loving enough that he knows each one of us so individually that he knows, he knows what we need. And so I think he takes that into account with our spouse. And so I know that he has been exactly what I need. Even at times I'm like, no, or you're rubbing me the wrong way, man. But it's always challenges me. And God has used him so much to correct things in me that have grown me in such amazing ways that I would have never grown had I not been in a marriage with someone very different from me. So
It's true.
And I think this next question kind of goes well into about how you're talking about singleness. The question is, what are some words of wisdom for someone in a season of waiting but has a desire for marriage?
Yeah, I actually, so are you guys okay if I just read you something?
Absolutely. No, yeah, we're okay with that. Yeah, we're okay.
Because I actually sat with one of my dearest friends. And she is almost 40. She'll be 40 this year. And she's still single. And I sat with her, and it really changed my perspective on some things because she told me, she's like, I went to so many of these events as a single woman, hearing couples talk about their marriage. And she said, and had they just had someone come that was single and talk about what that looks like at 40, 45, 50, and through tears, and I can count on one hand, I've known the girl since I was 16, the amount of times she's cried. She just said, that would have just made me feel like I'm okay. Like, this is okay. I'm normal. There's nothing wrong with me. And so, that really changed my perspective. Like, that happened right before we were supposed to do the last one, like the week of. And I've just been kind of dwelling on that. And so I just kind of asked the Lord what we could say. So I wrote something, and I feel like it's from the heart of God for those who are in a waiting season. And so I'm just going to read it. Okay. So singleness is not something we can speak into a whole lot. So I'm always cautious because I never want to come across as insincere. What I have watched single people do successfully, and I admire, is community. The most you can do is give God your best in whatever season you are in. Seasons of singleness, that Rain is trying to out-talk me. Seasons of singleness can be long or short, but never underestimate the hiddenness of any season that feels lonely or isolating. What do I mean by that? Hiding yourself in the presence of God while being single in this season of your life is not, while being single is not in this season of my life is not part of my story, I have experienced seasons of loneliness. And in those seasons, I lean into Jesus and ask, what is this work you're wanting to do in me, God? God will always take a lonely season and make it a monumental one with him. I would say, stay hidden in Jesus, make him your main priority, surround yourself with community, single people that can walk it out with you, but also married couples that will speak life into you and who you are. And allow God to shape your desires and be willing to have your world disrupted by love and another human. So I think the biggest thing that I feel like in all of that is community is so important.
I was going to say that really stuck out. I think that's super, super important is to, to stay in a community and I don't want to steal your thunder, but that really stuck out.
And just be challenged by that community. I think we can find people, right, that can totally validate every place that we're at and be like, oh yeah, you deserve to feel lonely, Cammie. Like, yeah, you've been through this or whatever. Let's just wallow in it, And sometimes I have to, but then I need that person in my community, whether it's been him or my friends, other friends, like, come on, we're getting up, we're getting out of this, we're going to go do something, we're going to do that. So even in whatever season that is for you, if that is singleness and you'd have that desire to be married, that, you're just surrounding yourselves with the people that will sit with you when you're sad, but also motivate you to like, hey, let's just keep doing this thing with Jesus and let's keep encouraging each other because I've got you, you know? And I think that that's really valuable. And I think, like I said, no season is ever wasted by God, whatever it looks like. And I have seen him do so many things in my life through seasons. And I think in seasons that I have felt the lowest in, right? Or I felt like, how could you possibly do anything good out of this? And he always does, because that's who he is. And so anyway, that's my encouragement.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I'm really passionate about people understanding their value. I think it's important that we not place value upon ourselves based on how we match up to what society expects from us, you know? So I think it's, you know, normal to look out in the world and be like, you know, I'm supposed to look like that. My house is supposed to look like that. My car, my whatever. And we constantly comparing ourselves to other people. And that just robs us. You know, I think it's a common thing, but I like to say comparison robs us of contentment. And really contentment in the Bible, you know, is so important. Us just finding contentment in where we are, in the season that we're in. And also just knowing our value is placed on us by God, not by the fact that I have this thing or this whatever, that, you know, in that season of singleness, your value is not diminished because you don't have this thing that, you know, you think the world expects from you or whatever. You know, you're just as valuable in and outside of a relationship.
So we have this other question. Guys, don't forget to submit questions. Do you have, so kind of going back a little bit to when we were talking about desires of marriage, to be in marriage, someone wrote, do you have any advice to someone who struggles with giving God control on those desires, seeking a spouse in a season of waiting? So as you said, Cammie, you know, God doesn't give us just these desires just or like he gave it for a reason. So someone has a desire to be married, but they're struggling to allow God to take control over those desires. So like maybe some advice on that front.
Yeah, I'm thinking through that. Do you have anything right away?
Yeah, well, I think that I was just having coffee with a guy the other day, and he's a young guy and in a relationship. And we were talking about expectations, and that's actually was the hardest part of premarital counseling for Cammie and I, was the expectations talk. Because we all have expectations every single day. Every one of us have expectations about almost everything in life. You know, we kind of go into it, this is what I want out of this. And I think that sets us up many times for disappointment. Or to release kind of that control, you know, and to say that, God, you can just whatever you want to do, but if I have my expectations, I'm not really releasing that to the Lord. So I think in the end, I've tried to learn, it's really hard, is that my expectation is that God is going to have his way in my life, and that it'll bring me joy, whatever it is. And so I guess that relates to the question a little bit.
Well, I mean, that could really be for any desire, really. So
any desire, yeah.
Yeah, I can understand though wanting to control things. I feel like I think it's a human desire to want to control things, but I don't know if it's more a woman thing that's trying to want to control everything. And I can definitely feel like when things slip out of my control that I'm like trying to pull it back, like my kids or anything. I'm like, no. But ultimately, yeah, I think, you know, when we try to control things or we worry about those things, it is just, you know, really putting things in our hands and in our court and not allowing God to have that control that he needs to move those pieces in our life. And it's extremely hard to relinquish that control of anything, but ultimately surrender is what you have to do in those moments and allow him to take that up and have the freedom to move with it. Because if we're holding on to something so tightly, God can't, and we're not releasing it to him, God, of course, God can do anything, but he can work so much freely through us and around us when we just give him that control. So I think it's really important, you know, to work on releasing that control and allowing God to have that part of your life. But beyond that, I think I just go back to that community aspect thing where find someone to talk to. Practically, like, I am having a really hard time letting control go of this thing. Could you pray with me? Or like, hey, I am just really frustrated, upset, in a place of despair about this because I have waited so long and now I just want to make something happen. I think releasing that to, to someone, just verbally letting it out, saying it to another person can be so helpful. And then they can like keep you accountable and help walk that with you and being like, hey, like, are you, whatever that looks like for anyone, right? Hey, are you trying to control that thing again? Like, are you letting God have control over that? So I don't know. I just feel like community is so important in that too. I know in many things, and I know we had a friend, singleness is, what we're talking about, but she was single, got married when she was 42, but she struggled with that. And we were her accountability, partners. And so she would weep with us. She would get angry with us. And we just had space for that, and then we were just like, pray with her and be like, you know what? God has a plan. I know that's hard to hear right now, but God has a plan and he wants good things for you. And I don't know what that looks like, but we're here. We're here along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I was going to say is that like we're your community for now,
Yeah.
And yeah, bigger the community, more chances you'll meet somebody too. So
Mixing that community up.
Yeah.
The next question, I guess, is for Cammie.
Oh, okay.
What do you do when your husband takes all the good flavor jelly beans?
Oh. I wonder who asked that question. Well, you know what? That's an interesting question because I feel like if there's any good leftovers in the fridge, Matt always somehow gets them. So I don't know how to help answer that. Maybe you just have to label all the jelly beans yours or lick all of them. That's my advice there.
You have to lay boundaries,
Yeah, boundaries. Yes, boundaries. If we haven't mentioned that,
Oh, okay. Давай вот это.
that rain is crazy.
Yeah, I tend to eat, we share a drink and I just drink the whole thing. I just,
It drives me crazy. He'll say, hey, do you want a drink of this? And I say no, so he thinks I never want a drink of it. So he
She said
guzzles
no.
it.
I don't understand.
And that goes to our next topic, communication. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Okay, so it's a great answer. What's one of the most challenging aspects of marriage that you didn't expect?
As an introvert, I feel like how much time like I have to share. Like how much space is interrupted by other humans, right? The husband and children, like that's something but that's more jokingly, but that's true. I feel that sometimes on a deep level. But I would say probably, what?
No, go ahead.
What are you going to say? Say it.
I was going to say, I think that has to be high on your list of like the fact that she didn't know marrying me, I was going to be so different than her for the rest of my life. I think she maybe expected I was going to
every few years I
slow
have to have
down
this
more.
like realization of like, oh yeah, he's like this and I'm like this. And we're never
I'm like a
and we're-
dog and she's like a cat.
Yes. And we live life together. No, it's wonderful. But I was an only child growing up. So if that gives you a clue into being alone a lot. And then now I have a husband, 3 kids, and 3 animals. So I'm just like I'm always being touched. And I'm just like, ugh, I'm touched out. So that's one of them. But I would say probably finances has been one of the most difficult things. Sharing finances, sharing spending habits, sharing like joining those things, communicating about those things and lack of communication about those things has probably, I think that's been the thing we've probably disagreed on the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you found ways to navigate around that, or is that an ongoing thing?
It's a work in progress.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. No,
I'd say
yeah.
that about every category, you know? I don't think
yeah.
we or anybody else have ever arrived, you know?
No, we
so-
never will. One interesting fact about us, though, is we are in our 17th year of marriage on May 31st. Thank you. But both of our parents got divorced at 17 years. So this is a big year for us. And so I think in saying that, you know, there's just a lot of things you deal with in relationship with other people, you know?
Yeah.
If you have a roommate, even if you're not married, like those types of things, like Lydia and Emily patting each other. Like there's just a lot to learn about that other person. And so like there can be so many things that come up that you're like, this is the hill I will die on, or this is the final straw. And you're just like, no, it's really not. Like we can walk through this. And if we're doing it together, then we can get through this.
That's the mindset to keep is like, it's not you versus
Right.
Matt, it's you versus the problem together.
Yes. And with Jesus, right? Because
Jesus,
us two
of course,
together are not
It's
going to get
enough,
nothing done.
Yeah.
A whole lot of Jesus. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that the challenges in marriage really aren't that different than the challenges in relationships in general. Of course, there's unique things within a marriage relationship, but people are people inside a marriage or just in relationship at work or school or any of those places. People are people, and making two puzzle pieces fit together that are shaped very differently can be difficult. So I think that mindset always of I've tried to get to the place of celebrating differences with any person as opposed to looking at them as like a bad thing. And I
I'm
think that's
still on that journey.
very important in a marriage relationship. You know, we're very different in many ways. And if you're constantly looking at other people like, I wish you were more like me, you're just always going to be disappointed and let down because people are not going to become more like you. And that's actually kind of the beauty of what God made. I mean, he made people different because that's the beauty of mankind. And so we need to celebrate those differences.
For sure.
Next one. What is your favorite memory from the early days of your relationship?
Favorite memory? Let me think through this. Been together a long time.
So every time we hang out with this family, the Krennings, my friend
what he's gonna
Scott
say.
brings up this story almost every time, which I kind of wish he'd stop doing it because I broke up with Cammie at youth camp one time.
In
Because
Texas, by the way. I was away from everyone I loved.
I
Just
felt like
kidding. I have friends there.
I felt like the Lord told me that my relationship with Cammie was like more important than my relationship with him to me, you know? And so I was like, Lord, I will lay it down, you know? I will cut her out of my life. Anyway, so I did that. And then she's crying in the like dorm room, you
That
know,
was
whatever.
a mess. Yeah.
And then
Oh, a
at some
mess.
point she goes to this guy Scott who was there.
Well, because I
who
heard
we're
he
still
got
friends with.
guidance from this guy Scott and Josh, this other guy, and so I was like,
She's just like crying, and I think you said to him something like,
I was yelling at him, and there's actually a picture. Someone was just taking a picture, and in the midst of the picture, it's me going like this to Scott.
so
And I think someone gave him the picture.
because
He's like,
his
"Oh, what
face
is
in the
Cammie
picture is
talking
him
to you
looking off
about?"
in the distance, squinting, and he's going like this.
Yeah. He's like trying to think, how do I respond to this
How do I get out
crazy
of this?
woman? Yeah, no, that's funny. So
I don't know if that's a fun memory, but it's funny now. So
it was
I
terrible.
like it.
Oh man. No,
sorry
it
about
is
that.
no, it's one of those things that you can't look back and laugh on for sure. I know when that happened, I went into the dorm room to who was actually Scott's girlfriend and wife now. And I just fell in her lap and just sobbed. And she was like, "You were so dramatic." And I was like, "Thank you." So, and then our old youth pastor will still say when I see her anytime, "Do you remember that youth camp that Matt broke up with you?" Yes, I do. But anyway, so it's a big joke now with everybody because we're married. So it worked out. But yeah, I'm trying to think of fun. You said fun memory?
Yeah, favorite memory. From
Favorite
early days.
memory.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's such a hard question.
There's so many. I mean,
So many. It's not that I actually am having a hard time recalling anything. Not that we weren't have great memories. But it's just hard for me to think through it because so much life has happened.
so many good times just with friends at your house and
Oh yeah, I can remember. We used to have game nights at my house when we were still teenagers and we were dating, and we would always play. Have any of you ever played the game Seen It?
Yes.
Yes. It was so fun, and sometimes they would show clips of certain movies, and him and his friends would get so tickled, and then they would be like, "Oh wait, have you guys seen this part in Final Destination?" So then they turn it on, and they would pause like this moment right when someone was getting a marshmallow thrown into their eye in Final
funny.
Destination, and just hysterically laugh. I mean, fall behind the couch, just laughing, crying. These boys, but that were the size of full-grown men, and I think those were some of my favorite memories. Was just hanging out with our friends, and because everybody's married now or has moved away. So I think that those are some of my favorite ones.
yeah, me too.
Kind of rewinding a little bit to when you were engaged. Thank you, Nasha. When you were too engaged, because we have some people that weren't able to come, but we'll see the video later, but they're engaged. And so do you have any advice as what preparations should you go through before you get married? Or what have you two did before you got married? Things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I personally really enjoyed premarital counseling, which was just really talking to another couple, that had
We
been
went through a
married.
book
And they
too,
took
though.
you through,
Yeah.
some questions and a book. But it really challenged, our way of thinking.
For sure.
And it asked questions like, what are you going to do at holidays? And it's like, you weren't thinking about any of that stuff. You're just like,
And then you both answer, my family. And then you're like, wait, what?
yeah.
So, yeah.
But money, family stuff, like so many things. So I think just talking about a lot of things, which is what I think you have to get used to in any relationship for
Yeah.
it to be successful, is learning how to communicate well and
sure.
learning how to interpret what that person's saying, because it can be very different. So I think just overly communicating.
I was going to say the same thing. Over communicate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
book and also over communicate and
Yeah.
have another person
A couple,
outside
probably.
third party to talk to
For
Yeah,
sure.
I
as you're
think so.
preparing
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
this moment.
premarital counseling is the best. And you can even get premarital counseling they offer it like through any therapist too. Like Christian therapists will offer that. I think it's really helpful to have all those, like he talked about, expectations just out there and talked about. And of course, when real life happens, you might not always remember those, but we were able to go back and we kept our books for like the first 7 years of our marriage. And we would even go back and be like, or, I'd pull it out. Well, you said that, because I can tend to do that sometimes. But yeah, I think for sure. And I think communication is still something we are always working on, right? And I think, I think over communication about things that you care about and things that you want to do well with each other is so important. Yeah.
So if willing to share, someone wrote, what was something in your guys' relationship that strongly tested your faith but came out stronger on the other side?
Our marriage or just relationship?
It says relationship, so I guess relationship or marriage, whatever point if it was before marriage, that I think that it still is.
I'll be very vulnerable and, say that, being a young man, I did struggle with, with pornography and stuff like that. And that very much tested our relationship. That was something that, we talked about very close to getting married that, almost like sidetracked us completely. But from her standpoint of like, can I trust you? So that was a real thing. It's a real thing for a lot of young men, dealing with that. And so it's important. I think it needs to be talked about more in churches and normalized to talk about the fact that there is an epidemic in the world, of over-sexualization in TV and movies and music and everything. that I think is destroying so many people's expectations of relationships and marriage and so many things.
Yeah.
So I think it needs to be talked about more. But that was a huge deal, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was probably one of the hardest. Yeah, I would say. For me, recovery wise, just walking through that and what that looks like, loving someone who you feel like has betrayed you. And that was a time too that we sought counsel and got help. And it was really, and it ended up being one of those things that was really beautiful in the end, because Jesus was in the midst of it, right? And I think that was, I think that was definitely one of the hardest ones for us, and that we came out stronger in the end where it could have wrecked you, right? Yeah.
Well, and I think going back to how you're saying about over communication, is better that that was out in the open. And like
For
how
sure.
you said, it seemed like that moment you're willing to share something so deep with your partner, you know,
Right.
it's something that is a very difficult topic to talk about.
Yeah.
So
For sure. And I think it's important too, when you know something's off, to be relentless in your pursuit of what's off. Because that was what for me, I was like, something's not right. And I just kept pursuing that. And then and then there was truth, and it was like, okay, now it's out there and now we can work on it. But, but I think when you're in a marriage, it's good to have outside accountability too, but you have to be accountable to each other, because that's the number one relationship there. Besides with Jesus, of course. I feel like that's a given. And so I think too, over communication and relentless pursuit for the truth is just really important. And I am like a super sleuth, so nobody can surprise me. I'm not, and I actually don't love that about myself. But anyway, like I just, when I know something's off with anyone, even friendships, I'm just always relentless to pursue, hey, what's going on? How can we make this right? Like, what are you feeling? What's going on? How are you? And I think that's so important in a marriage too, to be relentless, but also, and then communicate and vulnerable. Those are the main three for me.
Yeah, no, that's really good. What you said, Dennis, reminded me of, I think it was an analogy Pastor Josh gave at some point about, you have people over to your house, and depending on what kind of friends they are, are they more on the acquaintance level, or are they like family, like will determine what areas of your house you clean. Because it's like, what rooms are they going to go in, because if they're just acquaintances, they're going to feel uncomfortable even walking up and down steps, so like, we'll just clean the main floor, whereas family, it's like, we need to clean the basement. We need to clean the whatever.
as Dasha. Dasha will clean the entire house.
And I think that's important, that when you look at a relationship, you're only going to get as much out of that relationship as there are rooms that you're willing to show that person. So if you're saying that like you only have access to my main floor, you're only going to get that much out of that relationship. And then until you're willing to say, you can see the basement and the bathroom and my
All
shed,
the cobwebs,
and my closet and every part of my life, that's what you're going to get out of it. And I think that's true in our relationship with God and with people. If we're willing to surrender the darkest parts of our life to the Lord, we're going to get to actually see more of his character and his love than ever before. And I think that's true in relationships too. You can't keep anything hidden if you're wanting to have a deep, meaningful relationship with people.
Or else you're going to be stuck with main floor conversations for the rest of your life.
Surface level.
Yeah. Ugh.
And that stuff in the basement is going to come out eventually. So it's going to come out eventually. It'd be better to be proactively talking about it than for it to explode, because it's so full of skeletons that it just
But
the house collapses.
because again, it's showing that I'm willing to be vulnerable with my partner versus surprise that I didn't want you to find this out, and I didn't. And so
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that affects the relationship in a much different way as well.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
We have this just for a few more questions. I don't remember this part, but can you elaborate on the reconciliation after the Bible camp?
Oh, that's hilarious.
So
We still haven't reconciled. No, just
Oh,
kidding.
okay, I get it now.
Just kidding.
I think we were broken
Yes.
up for about a week. Yeah, a week. And what happened is like, I mean, I came to terms with the fact that like I think I had reacted, to what I felt like the Lord had
Just
said to me,
well.
because He was questioning my priorities. That was true. But actually, her father or her stepdad, my father-in-law.
Pop, if anybody knows.
Yeah, he he felt in his heart to share something with me, a very classic story from the Bible, about Abraham and Isaac, and that sometimes God is going to ask us to surrender the thing that's the most valuable to us, to see, are you willing to give that thing up? Which is Abraham and Isaac. God's like, I promised you this son, I gave him to you. And then I made you all these promises around this son, and then I asked you to take him to the altar and kill him. And Abraham's, faith through that is unbelievable, and gets all the way to the altar and is like about to slay his most beloved son. And the Lord's like, hey, stop. You've basically proven to me your faith. So I did feel like it was one of those moments where the Lord was challenging me, are you willing to do this? And I went through with it and passed the test. And in that, I felt like, okay, now I kind of know where my focus needs to be. And that again goes back to that first thing I said about God being in everything, because God was like, I can still be the center of your focus in this thing, but I had kind of put him over here, and like he was separate from this, and she was my infatuation, so.
I mean, we were 17 and 18, so we were really young. But yeah, I think during that time, I just prayed a lot and journaled a lot of like my feelings, because once again, only child, homeschooled, so I was alone a lot. So I, would write a lot and things like that. So yeah, I think I just really pursued God and just asked him to, if this was supposed to be him, that it would work out. And if not, I didn't want to feel this way anymore, because I was really sad, but also just like, I just don't, I also don't want to be so infatuated with this human that I can't see what you're doing. So if this is you, let it be. Like, that's right. This is right if you want it to be. So
I think that kind of answers this question. When is the right time to ask the question? How do you know when God's timing? Kind of how you were saying, like, God, let me know if this is not
for sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's God's timing, and like when something's done, or
I think they mean about proposing specifically. I know that I guess that's different than what you were saying.
Okay.
Well, in a way. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I guess that's more
What
for
do you
Matt.
think, Matt?
I don't know. I think one facet of that question is that I think we can get stuck in our minds that like we're going to be ready for something. And I think that that's unattainable, because you actually can't be ready to be married. I'm just going to be honest. Like you can have all the things like checked on paper of like what you think, like I have a house and I have a stable job and I have whatever. Those things are good. That's wonderful. But you can never actually prepare yourself to be married. You can't really prepare yourself to have a child. You can't really prepare. Like those are all things that you walk through, and you become a completely different person as you walk through them. And so I tell people all the time that like, or we talk about all the time that like our 14-year-old can't understand some of the things we try to communicate to him because he's never been in that life situation before. And as soon, like, have you guys ever felt like you understand your parents more as you get older? Like, like you get older and you're like, oh my gosh, like I understand, why they are the way they are, or why they say the things they say. I think it's just one of those things. It's like you have to walk through things and experience them to become that person. So I think, so to that question, I think like I know that there's a peace that can come over you. I know that there's preparations that can be made. I think there's a lot of wisdom and discernment and knowing, kind of what Cammie said. She's very good at discerning things, knowing that like, hey, is this the right moment or not? At the same time, you can't psych yourself out and think that you're going to be completely ready for it, because you're just not.
And you just got to do it.
You just gotta do it.
Yeah, you gotta step out in faith. No, yeah.
Do it and know that God's going to
Yeah.
help you through it. You know, that's
Right.
pretty much it. You wake up every day. There's a reason God says his mercies are new every morning and not every year, because he's like, you're going to need new ones every day.
Yeah.
You're going to need new grace to get through today. And even Jesus says, like, don't worry about tomorrow. Today has enough troubles of its own. So I think that's important for us to always realize, like,
Yeah,
you just got to get through today, you know, and the Lord's going to help you through that. So,
for sure. For sure. Yeah. I don't know that I have much to add to that. Like, I think if you're walking close with the Lord and you learn to hear his voice and how he moves in your own life and in your own, you know, you as an individual, then that's going to help you to know where he's leading you in any given moment. And sometimes you will hear nothing. And like you said, you just got to leap. If you know that, you know, hey, I think this is the right thing and I'm going to go for it. And that's scary because like we talked about earlier, you kind of are releasing control and you're like, I think this, you know, falling into it, which I don't love, but I think God requires that sometimes.
So,
yeah.
oh,
Well, I was just going to say, I think a thought came to mind. I went to this interesting men's event one time where this prophetic guy came, and he had us do some like prophetic exercises. And if you don't know what prophecy is, I mean, it's essentially, some people are more gifted in it than others, but hearing from the Lord. And sometimes that's for other people or for groups of people and being able to communicate those things. But the bottom line is we can all hear from the Lord. Like that's just everybody. Some people are just more gifted or a mantle's placed on them to do it more substantially. But he was talking about, and I think this is fascinating, the right and the left side of the brain and how they're very different. You know, the left side's the logical, black and white, make things make sense. The right side is that creative side. And it's very abstract. You know, everything's abstract and not logical. And that's, you know, you ever have dreams or just random thoughts or whatever. And he was like, you know, we tend to place God in that left side of the brain. We tend to like him to say things that make sense to us. At the same time, he actually uses our creativity to speak to us. And I found that I've had just random thoughts about things that are so obscure, like a dream that you're like, that's the weirdest thing. You know, why was there a baby that I thought was mine in that dream? I've never seen it before. It's like you have the weirdest things, or why did I see a tree that was multicolored, or whatever. But God will actually speak through those things. And so to answer your question, which is how do I know it's the right time or whatever, I think we have to understand that I see the world through a very unique lens that is mine. I was raised by my dad and my mom. I have unique life experiences. And so I have this creative side of my brain sees things in a certain way. And God will reveal things to me through that creative side of my brain that wouldn't make sense to anybody else, but it makes sense to me. I think that's important, to follow your instincts. If you're like, I just have a feeling, I just had a dream, I just had a thought, I just have whatever, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense on paper, and if I told somebody else, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But you have to follow that. I believe that. God speaks to us through that creative, abstract thought. And so sometimes we just have to go after it because it's the right thing to me. I just get it. And one of the examples he gave was that the color brown means pastoralness to him. There's nothing in the Bible that says that. There's not even a website you can find that says that. But for him, that's just what it means. And so he saw a guy one time in a three-piece suit and was like, something about that guy and that color brown, I think he's a third-generation pastor because he had a three-piece suit on, all brown. And he goes up to the guy, and he's talking to him. He's like, yeah, my dad was a pastor, my grandfather was a pastor, and his dad was a pastor. And then he was like, yeah, you're supposed to be a pastor. And the guy's like, I've been like avoiding that calling on my life. But for that guy, he was like, for some reason, the color brown means that to me. And I just had a feeling about the guy. Makes no sense to anybody else, but it's true. So I just think there's things like that. We just have to go after it because it's like, I don't know. I just feel it. I just feel it in my gut and my bones that this is the right thing. And you don't need a black and white answer, a voice from heaven.
Or like, yeah, voice from heaven. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry about for that long ramble.
No, I think that was very
We
good.
were worried
Yeah.
that we weren't going to talk too much. So I think
No, yeah,
so I'm talking too much.
we exceeded expectation.
yes, we do. Yeah, I think it was great. The last question though that we wanted to talk about, just a little bit, 5 minutes, is
5 minutes.
after you had kids, how did your relationship change?
I don't know. I feel like we become more mature.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I think each of us, or each one of us, dealt with it probably differently. I do think we grew a lot. I think your dependence on each other changes and shifts because there's this new added thing to your relationship of we don't just have each other anymore. Now we have this human and then two more.
And dividing up that time.
Yeah, dividing that time, caring for
lot.
them. And when they're babies, it's a lot, it's a lot of work in general. But when they're babies, they need you in a very different way, as you know. And now the way they need us is different than that. But yeah, when we had kids, I actually dealt with really bad postpartum depression with Jude. So for like 9 months of his life, I don't actually remember the first 9 months of his life because I was just really not functioning and very much despair. It just hormonally and everything, I just was not in a good place. And God actually healed me because I hadn't told anybody. Well, I did tell one person and they were not very kind or thoughtful in their response to me. So I kind of just was like, I'm not telling anybody else about that. But I was genuinely suffering. And so our pastor at the time, we were leaving because we were youth pastors at the time. We were leaving church and he called me over and he said literally everything that I had said to God in quiet, he was saying aloud to me. God said, you're saying this. And he just started praying and rebuking those things in my life and literally within a week, I was a completely different person. So God miraculously healed me in that time, but I dealt with it with each of the kids. It got better in quicker. Not with Jonah, actually. That one was different because we had a miscarriage right before Jonah. And so I was just so grateful Jonah was alive, that I gave birth to a child that was alive. And so there was a different actually excitement and joy with Jonah. Not that like he's my favorite or anything. I mean, he's a pretty cool guy. But it was a different hormonal shift for me. And then Lydia was really tough too. So all that to say, I think that he had to learn how to love me in all of those places, in a place of despair, in a place, and then also saying, oh, you know what, she needs more encouragement from me in this time. And I need to be aware and anticipate maybe a little bit more what she needs in this moment, while also anticipating the needs of our new child. So I feel like he did. He had hard moments too, but I feel like we just had to learn each other in a new way. And there were new things that came with it, personality things that we weren't even expecting, right? Especially for me, and sleep deprivation that, it just kind of makes you a little crazy. I love babies and love them so much, but I do think that it's like they were trained in the womb and they're like, okay, how can we break them? But yeah, no, I think, you just learn each other in a new way and you sometimes don't even know how you got there, but then you're like, oh, hey, this is our new normal. Like, how did we get here? And we're functioning again. And hey, I can look at your face and we have time together again. So I just think it's all just to remember that life is seasons. And when you're married, that's the same. So when you have your first child, there's this season where you're going to need each other a little differently. And then you shift into your new normal. It's like we are no longer the Matt and Cammie that we were when we first got married. And we're never going to be them again. We're not the same Matt and Cammie that had Jude, Jonah, or Lydia. We just keep changing and growing together. And that's the most important thing, is that you do it together.
Yeah, not much I can add to that.
Wow.
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
so we have one final surprise question
Surprise.
for you. It's very open-ended. So go ahead and Dash, take it away.
So, what Matt do for you? 3 things that you feel like, oh my gosh, he loves me so much. And the same question for you.
Yeah.
Like it will be like maybe like
Yeah.
a simple something
Yeah.
like coffee, or, you know.
For sure. No, that's changed a lot over the years with kids and stuff. I probably would have given you a different answer, 13 years ago. But now I love when he takes the kids out for a couple hours and leaves me at home alone by myself. And I can either read a book or do whatever I want. Do whatever I want. I usually catch up on housework, let's be real. But it still just gives me that freedom to be alone. I can have a show on that I enjoy, those types of things. So that really fills my tank because I just like need that time to just restore and repair and be ready for the kids again. The second thing, be simple. When
It could be like, he kisses me on the cheek in the morning or whatever.
bringing me coffee in bed in the morning, that's wonderful. It's not something we really do anymore because we have so many animals to take care of that wake us up at the crack of dawn, or him, really. I guess the third thing would be he lets me sleep in and he takes care of the
Yeah.
animals. There you go. There's 3.
Nice. Let's see. So we're doing a thing called ABC Dating, which she found on Instagram or something. And so
Copyright
we're
Instagram.
doing dates based on every letter of the alphabet. And so it meant a lot to me when she just came into my office like 2 weeks ago or so. And I was supposed to be planning the C date. And I didn't even have, I don't think we were going to do it that night or something like that. But she just kind of took it over. And she was like, I've got all these things I'm excited about. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And that just meant a lot to me. Like that she just took the time to think about, this is what I want to do with you. And yeah, so that meant a lot to me. She has tried to strengthen her thumbs to massage my shoulders. She's very intentionally, like focused on, like, am I pushing hard enough? And she's like pushing with all her might. And I'm like, that's like a mosquito on my back, you know? That's meant a lot to me.
Because he plays soccer. And yeah, he's 38 years old. So he's always got some
It's
kinks.
not old.
It's not old, but your recovery time is a little longer.
Okay. And then number 3, when she lets me ramble about some song or movie that I've watched that I'm into.
Or code.
Or code. Yeah, she's listened to it, you know. Writing code is pretty fun. And
It
it's
is.
boring to talk about. Not to me, but she'll listen to me ramble about it. So that's nice.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Again, thank you so much
Yeah,
for giving
thank
your
you.
time
Thanks
for
for
the
listening.
interview.
Thanks for having us.
If you could maybe close us out in prayer,
Sure. Yeah.
and then that will complete our Love Is interview.
Sweet.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Lord, thank you so much for this moment in time that you've given us to be together. We just thank you that your presence is here right now. I pray, Lord, that just any piece of wisdom that we have to share, God, that our hearts are soft to you, and that, God, you would plant wisdom in our hearts and that you'd water it and it would grow into just a beautiful life. Pray that each person here, that you just bless their life and that you let them bear beautiful fruit for you and your kingdom, and that their life is just a flourishing tree. Thank you, Lord, that you're doing new things in each person's life. Just open our hearts and our minds to you and what you want to do. In Jesus' name, amen.